Breathe. Let the air come in slowly like a quiet tide and leave just as gently. Feel the weight of your shoulders drop a little. Notice the rhythm in your chest, steadying itself. Now ask, without hurry and without fear, what if the most frightening thing in your life isn't a sudden storm, but the soft, familiar comfort that keeps you asleep through the warning bells? What if the danger isn't out there, but in here, the unnoticed patterns, the autopilot that smiles and says, "I'm fine," while the years slide by? This is not to scare you into panic. This is to scare you awake with tenderness. This is to place a hand on your shoulder and say, "I see you, and you were made for more than drifting. In this quiet space, you are safe. No accusations live here, only truth with a handkerchief, truth that wipes the fog from the glass so you can see your own reflection clearly." Your nervous system loves the familiar because it feels safe. Even when the familiar is slowly draining you, your brain repeats what it rehearses. Your heart absorbs what it hears. Repetition writes grooves, and grooves become roads, and roads lead somewhere, whether you choose the destination or not. Tonight, we will listen for the ancient voice that calls above the noise, the voice that invites you to wisdom, not superstition, not spectacle, wisdom that is spiritual enough to touch the soul and practical enough to reorder a day. Wisdom that stands in the street and calls, that walks into your calendar and rearranges the chairs. You may feel a tug inside, a small ache behind the ribs, an old longing stretching awake. Pay attention to that. It isn't guilt. It's guidance. Guilt paralyzes. Guidance lifts your chin. Notice the simple details around you, the light on the wall, the temperature of the room, the feeling of your feet on the floor. Let your senses anchor you in the present, because change only begins where your feet actually stand. When you are present, your prefrontal mind can choose what your limbic memory only repeats. When you are present, your heart can become a gatekeeper again, rather than a revolving door. Presence turns the volume down on fear and turns the volume up on wisdom. Presence is how awakening starts. There's a kind of fear that is clean. It doesn't shame you or shrink you. It clarifies you. It tells the truth about consequences with a steady voice and an open hand. It is the fear that says, if you keep walking half asleep, you will miss the very life you asked for. It is the fear that points to the open city gates at night and whispers, close them, not to imprison yourself, but to protect what is precious. The ancients called it the beginning of wisdom, not the end of joy. This fear does not chase you, it invites you. It does not punish, it prepares. It does not humiliate, it humbles. There is a difference, and your body knows it. Feel the difference. Feel the steadiness that returns when the truth stands up in the room. You are not behind, you are not late, you are here, and here is where the tide can turn. The habits that kept you numb can be unlearned, the grooves can be softened, the road can bend. You do not have to sprint, you do not have to prove anything to anyone in this moment. You only need to listen. Listen as if your future self were calling from a quiet hill with a lantern, waving you toward the path that has waited for you since you first said you wanted a meaningful life. Listen as if the street itself had a voice, as if wisdom stood on the corner, patient and persistent, pointing at the same few doors you've always walked past. Listen as if the heart were not just an organ, but a spring, and what you allow in determines what overflows out. So settle. Settle your breath. Settle your shoulders. Settle your attention. If you feel resistance rising, notice it, name it, and let it drift by like a cloud that doesn't belong to you. If you feel a trembling hope, notice that too, and let it stay. Tonight is not about spectacle. Tonight is about clarity. Clarity in your calendar, clarity in your choices, clarity in your relationships, clarity in the quiet places where no one applauds but everything is decided. Let this be a gentle alarm that does not jolt you, but gradually brightens the room until you can see the floor beneath your feet and the door that has always been there. Listen to this audio for just 40 minutes and let it unsettle the comfortable drift that kept you from yourself, not to frighten you into hiding, but to awaken you into a life you will recognize as your own. There is a particular stillness that comes before a turning point. It does not arrive with thunder. It arrives with a small pause in the day when the room feels strangely clear and the air tastes honest. In that stillness, a warning speaks with a steady voice. It says that a life does not collapse in a single blow. It softens at the edges first. It unravels thread by quiet thread. It asks for attention long before the tear becomes a rip. Wisdom always raises its voice in the open square. Disaster prefers the whisper in the back alley. One calls in daylight. The other waits for the watchman to fall asleep. Think of a city at night. The gates stand open because nothing terrible has happened in a while. The streets are calm. The lamps burn low. The guards lean on their spears and trade stories to pass the time. This is when losses slip in. Not because the enemy is stronger, because the gate grew used to staying open. The image is simple for a reason. Your attention is the gate. Your eyes and ears are the watchman. Your heart is the treasury behind the wall. What enters often will rule quietly. What is allowed to linger will own the keys. Nothing steals your life faster than what you invite without noticing. Most people do not ignore warnings because they enjoy danger. They ignore them because the warning feels small. The email can wait. The conversation can happen later. The appetite for one more scroll does not look like a thief at the door. It looks like a friend who asks for only a minute. The body loves patterns that feel familiar. The mind saves energy by repeating the last choice. The nervous system sketches shortcuts and calls them safety. When the same input arrives again and again, the inner gate swings open on its own. The watchers lower their guard not out of malice, but out of habit. This is how the soul grows drowsy while the calendar keeps turning. There is another reason warnings are ignored. Flattery dresses itself as reassurance and tells you that everything is fine. It strokes your fear of change and says that wisdom is overreacting. Compliments can be kinder than the truth for a moment. Then they become expensive. The gentle wound from a faithful voice hurts, but heals straight. The soft pillow of false comfort lets the spine curve until walking becomes painful. The mirror that shows a crack is a gift. The mirror that hides it is a trap. When a warning comes from love, it does not shame. It invites you back to alignment. When a warning comes from fear, it pushes you into hiding. Your body knows the difference if you listen with honesty. Some call this inattention conscience. Some call it intuition. Some call it the quiet guidance of the spirit. Whatever name you choose, the texture is the same. A pressure under the sternum, a tug in the throat, a gentle heat behind the eyes. The brain reads this signal and tries to explain it away. The heart reads it and wants to pay attention. If you practice ignoring it, the signal grows faint. If you honor it, the signal grows clear. Neuroscience would call this shaping your pathways. Ancient wisdom would call it training your ears to hear in the street. Both point to the same reality. You become what you repeatedly allow. The scene of the sleeping watchman matters because it reveals timing. Warnings are generous. They arrive early. They arrive again. They arrive through many voices. A friend who asks if you are all right even though you smiled. A number that does not add up when you glance at the account. A child who starts avoiding the room when the device turns on. A body that wakes tired after a night spent chasing noise. None of these look like emergencies. All of these sound like footsteps at the gate. The cost of ignoring them is not only the crisis that might follow, the cost is the erosion of trust in your own hearing. Each ignored signal makes the next one easier to dismiss. Imagine the heart as a spring set within the city. If the gate is unguarded, the spring grows cloudy. The water still flows. It simply carries what you did not filter at the edge. Envy slips in with the dust, and now the water tastes bitter. Impulse arrives with a grin, and now the water has a sweet film that leaves the mouth dry. Cynicism blows in on a cold wind, and now the water chills the bones even in summer. Guarding the gate is not about fear. It is about the quality of the water that everyone in the house will drink. It is about the flow that goes out to the gardens you want to keep alive. There is a sound that wisdom makes when it calls. It is not loud, it is persistent. It repeats the same few truths with patience because truth does not grow old. Pay attention to what enters. Pay attention to what repeats. Pay attention to what dulls your courage and what sharpens it. The same sentence walks through your thoughts in the late afternoon. The same image appears when you try to rest. The same conversation asks for daylight and you keep reaching for night. When the pattern repeats, it is not nagging. It is guidance turning up the volume to meet your resistance. The pattern is the bell at the city gate. It rings until someone stands up to listen. If fear rises as you hear this, you are not being condemned. You are being clarified. The right kind of fear is clean. It separates you from the fog. It points to the open gate and shows the footprints on the threshold. It says that what you love deserves protection. It says that your future deserves a sober present. It is the fear that leaves you taller after it speaks. The wrong kind of fear leaves you smaller. The right kind leaves you steady. Let your shoulders soften around that distinction. Let your breathing slow again. Notice the room. Notice your own steadiness returning as the truth stands beside you without raising its voice. There is a grace in early course correction. It asks for less repair later. It preserves dignity. It keeps relationships from hardening into roles that nobody wants to play. It spares resources that can be used for building instead of mopping up. Every time you honor a small warning, you move the story back toward peace. Every time you pass it by, the cost increases, even if the bill arrives quietly. Peace is not accidental. It is the fruit of attention. Prosperity is not only money, it is the abundance that comes from guarded gates and clear springs. Legacy is not only what you leave, it is what you live while others are watching your way of moving through the city. The image remains, a city at night, lamps along the wall, the gate that swings because it got used to staying open, the watchman who blinks and realizes how long he has been staring at the same patch of road. In that moment he straightens, he looks with new eyes, he listens for footsteps that do not belong to friends. He feels the weight of the keys in his hand and remembers why he was given them. This is not drama. This is dignity. This is the quiet courage of an awakened guard who knows the value of what he protects and the cost of what he allows. Which warning have you ignored twice this month? There is a rush that feels like life itself. The morning opens, the light is still soft, and already the pulse leans forward as if the day were a race that began without a starting bell. The mind stacks tasks to the ceiling and calls the tower progress. The body learns the taste of urgency and asks for another sip. The hours blur into a single streak, bright and loud and strangely thin. The motion is real. The meaning is not. When speed becomes a habit, emptiness wears the costume of momentum, and the calendar applauds while the soul grows quiet. Ancient wisdom has always been gentle and direct about this. Haste scatters. Careful work gathers. One path multiplies peace over time. The other spends tomorrow to feel powerful today. Modern language would say that the limbic mind loves the quick hit and the quick win, while the wiser part of you thrives on direction and follow through. The first loves movement. The second loves meaning. When movement wins too often, life becomes a crowded hallway where you keep bumping into yourself and apologizing without knowing why. Imagine a chariot at full speed across a wide plain. The sun is high, the dust is thick, the wheels sing on the hard earth. There is power here, a real force that shakes the chest, but the driver cannot see. A strip of cloth covers the eyes, and the horses only know forward. Every small stone becomes a threat, because correction is not possible. Momentum without sight turns strength into risk. Energy without orientation turns effort into accident. In that image, an old truth stands quietly. Direction is a form of kindness. Clarity is a form of protection. Velocity persuades because it is measurable. You can point to the miles and the messages and the meetings and say that the day was full. Fulfillment is harder to measure. It does not shout. It settles into the bones as a quiet rightness. It makes ordinary tasks feel like they have a name. It turns effort into a harvest instead of a bonfire. The nervous system prefers the buzz because it drowns out the ache. The heart prefers the path because it answers the ache. One leaves you spinning on a bright wheel. The other moves you an inch that matters. There is a biology to this. When the body learns to chase urgency, it rewires itself for short loops. The loop promises relief, so the loop repeats. The loop repeats, so the loop becomes the story. Over time, the threshold for calm rises until stillness feels like a threat and rushing feels like home. The prefrontal mind, the part that holds a map and a compass, grows crowded by alarms that are not emergencies. Reaction eats attention. Attention fuels reaction. Around and around it goes until exhaustion wears a grin and calls itself resilience. The cost hides itself well. Relationships get the leftovers of your awareness and begin to mirror the lack of presence they receive. Craft shows tiny cracks that only reveal themselves months later as missed chances. Money slips away through small impulses because there was no quiet moment to ask whether this choice serves the larger aim. Spiritual life becomes a set of phrases without the slow fire of encounter. The face in the mirror knows something is off, but cannot name it over the noise. Speed becomes an alibi that protects you from the pain of honesty while deepening the pain that needed your honesty. There is another way to feel power. Not the power of acceleration, the power of alignment. It begins as a different sensation in the body, less sprinting in the chest, more grounded weight in the lower ribs. The mind feels less like a crowded train and more like a clear road at dawn. Ideas stop colliding and start arranging themselves. You recognize the few things that would still matter if the lights went out and the crowd left. You remember the work that feels like a promise you made to your younger self. The day shifts from many to meaningful. Some call this rhythm planning and pacing and reviewing. Others call it wisdom, walking beside a person and asking simple questions. What matters here? What can wait? What would build if it were repeated? No pressure, no applause. Just a steady cadence that creates room for focus to take root. The change is not glamorous, it is gentle. It is the difference between heavy rain that washes the soil away and a steady watering that brings a garden back from the edge. The garden does not shout, it grows. You will notice that this pace carries a kind of music. It has rests as well as notes. The rests are not wasted. They are where understanding matures. They are where insight lands and makes a home. They are where your inner watchman can look out across the day and see beyond the next hill. Daily life is full of noise that mimics rhythm and tricks the body into thinking it is dancing. True rhythm is quieter and more demanding in the best way. It calls for presence. It rewards presence with peace. There is a saying that the race does not always belong to the fastest. People who live close to wisdom nod at this without argument. They have seen bursts of effort burn bright and vanish. They have seen steady hands build houses that last. The world often looks like a stadium full of sprinters, but the deeper work happens on old paths where someone keeps walking in the same faithful direction. That person is not trying to be impressive. That person is trying to be true. And true is what remains when the noise goes home. If fear rises as you hear this, notice that it is not the fear that shrinks you. It is the clean fear that clarifies you. It is showing the cost of speed without map and offering the relief of a slower truth. To move with purpose is not to lose fire. It is to aim the fire so it warms instead of scorches. It is to remember that a day is not only a container for tasks. A day is a field where seeds are planted or scattered. The harvest will arrive in its time. The only question that matters beneath the bright urgency is a gentle one. Where are you moving fast with no map? There is a sweetness that sits on the tongue and turns heavy in the stomach. Words that glow like warm light at first touch, then leave a film that dulls the senses. Flattery arrives like a soft cloth that polishes the surface and avoids the crack. It offers comfort without clarity, relief without repair, and for a moment the body relaxes because agreement feels like safety. Underneath, Something truer grows restless because the soul recognizes when it is being soothed instead of seen. Blessing and flattery are not the same river. Blessing nourishes the roots and sometimes tastes like medicine. Flattery waters only the leaves and avoids the soil where real growth begins. Blessing can bruise the pride and heal the person. Flattery protects the pride and abandons the person. One is correction carried by care, and its tone is steady even when the words are strong. The other is convenience dressed as kindness, and its tone smooths edges that do not need smoothing. It is the silk glove that hides a blade, because it steals the strength that only honest contact can give. The brain is wired to love agreement. Approval sprinkles the mind with bright sparks, and the nervous system purrs because belonging feels safe. There is a helpful side to this, because encouragement can stabilize effort and hope. But when agreement becomes the only food, learning slows and sight narrows. Confirmation chases confirmation. Echoes return to the chamber, and the map becomes a mirror. What seems like peace is only quiet, and what seems like unity is only a group pretending not to notice the leak in the boat. The dopamine of being praised can be sweet, but sweetness without substance numbs the tongue that should be tasting for truth. Flattery is not only a social habit, it becomes an atmosphere. It lives in rooms where hard conversations are postponed until the floor buckles. It lives in screens that show only what you already like. It lives in compliments that are traded as currency, so no one has to feel the risk of honesty. In that air, courage shrinks. In that air, small problems are allowed to grow teeth. In that air, the mirror loses its sharpness, and every reflection looks fine until the glass finally breaks and tells the story it was asked to hide. There is another sound entirely when love speaks the hard word. It does not humiliate, it humbles. It does not attack, it attends. It does not leave a wound that festers. It cleans the wound and stays nearby while it closes. At first, the body flinches because truth stings where numbness once lived. Then the breath deepens, the shoulders loosen, and a strange relief arrives because reality has entered the room. The honest wound from a faithful voice is an act of protection, not punishment. It keeps a life from drifting into places the soul did not choose. Think of a mirror that reveals a hairline crack across the corner. You might wish for soft light to hide it, a kinder angle to flatter the shape, but a hidden crack spreads in the dark, and one day, the whole frame gives way. A revealing mirror looks unkind for a minute and proves to be mercy over a lifetime. A flattering mirror looks merciful for a minute and proves to be unkind when the season asks for weight it cannot carry. The difference is simple. One prepares you, one leaves you pretty and unprepared. There is also the voice within that flatters. It knows your weak hours and favorite exits. It whispers that you deserve the easy path because the hard path has been hard for so long. It says the other person is always the problem and the pattern is always a coincidence. It says tomorrow will be the day you finally change, so today can continue as before. These lines sound gentle, but they are sedatives that keep the deeper ache from speaking. Underneath, a wiser voice keeps clearing its throat, asking to be heard without the costume and without the script. Flattery manipulates because it trades intimacy for influence. It speaks what someone wants to hear in order to gain access to what they have. It does not protect the person, it protects its own advantage. In work, it shows up as praise that rises quickly and disappears when accountability enters. In love, it shows up as compliments that avoid conflict and keep the surface smooth while the foundation shifts in silence. The effect is the same across settings. Choices drift away from what is true and toward what is easy, and a quiet fatigue begins to live in the chest. There are signs that help tell the difference. After truth, even when it stings, a deeper calm returns, because alignment is restoring itself. After flattery, even when it sparkles, a thin anxiety lingers because something essential has been avoided. After truth, you breathe more fully and the room seems brighter. as if the windows opened. After flattery, you feel glazed and restless, as if you ate too much sugar and cannot settle. The body keeps the score and becomes a better instrument the more it is tuned to these signals. It matters to say this with tenderness. No one must be ashamed for enjoying approval. We were made for belonging and encouragement, and there is a holy warmth in words that lift a weary spirit. The harm only begins when affirmation becomes a shield against reality. Then the applause becomes a wall that blocks the light that would have shown the right path. Then the smile becomes a mask that is afraid to be removed. The soul does not thrive under masks. It breathes under truth that is delivered with love. Somewhere in your story, there is a person whose loyalty is not to your comfort, but to your wholeness. Their care is sturdy enough to carry a hard sentence across a delicate bridge. Their voice does not rise and does not tremble. It simply arrives with clarity and stays with kindness. That kind of loyalty is a shelter. That kind of courage is a gift. It is the opposite of the silk glove. It is the steady hand that closes the small cut before infection can spread. It is the mirror that tells the truth and stays in the room while you steady yourself. A life wrapped in flattery becomes fragile because it is protected from the small stresses that make it strong. A life held by honest love becomes resilient because it is trained to bear weight in the right places. One dies from 1,000 tiny avoidances. The other lives by 1,000 tiny alignments. One whispers sleep, the other wakes you with soft light. In the end, the face in the mirror knows the difference, and the heart knows who has been a shelter and who has been a sedative, who loves you enough to risk offending you. Imagine a quiet chamber deep within you. The walls are warm with memory, and the air hums with faint electricity. Panels of light flicker as thoughts pass by. Levers glow with emotion. Dials turn with desire. This is the place that translates whispers into choices and moments into patterns. It feels private, yet everything you touch in the outer world is touched here first. The tone of your voice begins here. The courage of your steps begins here. The drift and the return both begin here. Modern language might call it attention and effect and valuation. Ancient language keeps it simple and calls it the heart. Both are pointing to the same center. Your senses deliver their cargo to this room from morning to night. What you watch stays on the table. What you hear sits in the chair by the door. What you rehearse again and again starts to walk the halls as if it owns the place. Neural pathways thicken like well-used corridors. Emotions become quick messengers that move ahead of reason. The body learns the map and begins to walk it without asking permission. Every input has a flavor. Some cleanse, some cloud, some inflame, some steady. A kind voice that tells the truth carries minerals that strengthen the bones of the will. A stream of images that provoke envy adds a fine silt to the water so that everything tastes a little bitter. A late-night habit that promises relief leaves a sweetness on the tongue and a dryness in the soul. None of this is moral arithmetic that shames. It is simple chemistry. It is the way streams feed a spring and the way a spring feeds a river. Whatever enters the chamber begins to tint what flows out. Desire is not the enemy here. Desire is the heat that moves the engines. The trouble begins when desire is trained by noise instead of wisdom. Then impulse dresses up as urgency and spends strength on everything glimmering and nothing lasting. The purchase that gives a rush costs more than money. The glance that flatters the ego takes interest from the future of a relationship. The clever distraction steals attention that would have grown a skill. The heart does not stop working when this happens. It simply works on requests that never asked whether they should be granted. There is also a tenderness here that deserves protection. The memory of a promise made to your younger self rests in a small drawer that opens when you are quiet. The ache to be whole lives in a chair by the window and waits for you to notice. The sense of the sacred stands at the threshold like a respectful guest who will not enter uninvited. Harsh inputs crowd these presences back into the walls. Gentle and honest inputs give them room to breathe. Over time, the atmosphere of the chamber shifts. A life either grows hospitable to truth or allergic to it. The language of the body keeps telling the story. When the chamber is cluttered, sleep is restless, and mornings rise heavy. When the chamber is clear, breath moves lower, and the face softens without trying. The nervous system reflects what the heart has been handling. Spikes of stimulation create spikes of craving. Steady nourishment creates steady strength. You can feel the difference the same way you can taste the difference between water from a sealed spring and water from a broken cistern that has been gathering dust and insects in the heat. Spiritual wisdom has always pictured the inner life as a source, not a factory, a source, a spring that feeds words and work and love. When the source is guarded, peace travels outward into choices and schedules. When the source is neglected, confusion leaks into the same spaces without announcing itself. The outer life may still look busy and bright. The current underneath loses its clean line. People around you will notice even if they cannot name it. The room feels different. The river sounds different. Sometimes the kindest thing a person can experience is the return of quiet, not the quiet of avoidance, the quiet that follows the storm of distraction. In that quiet, the lights in the control room recalibrate. Signals arrive without distortion. Longings that were buried under noise float to the surface and ask to be honored. Courage stands up again with its old calm face. The chamber feels like a place of counsel instead of a marketplace. That feeling is not glamour. That feeling is grace. Hold the image of the spring for a moment. Clear water moving from the deep earth to the open air. Stones around the mouth so that what should not enter stays outside. A simple cover when the night winds rise. Nothing elaborate, nothing dramatic. Just care that becomes habit. Just love for what the water gives to every field and every cup. When the source is respected, the whole landscape changes. When the source is exposed, the garden struggles even with rain. What input is shaping your heart without permission? There is a fullness that looks like abundance and feels like a slow suffocation. The day brims with commitments. The shelves bend with projects. The calendar gleams with colored blocks that promise worth and deliver weariness. At a distance, it can look impressive. Up close, it sounds like a house where every room is occupied, yet no one is truly at home. Noise arrives early and stays late. Achievements collect like trophies in a dusty case, while the heart presses a quiet palm against the glass and asks for air. Ancient wisdom carries a simple picture that cuts through the glare. Better one handful with rest than two handfuls with a fist around the wind. The words are plain and stubborn, and they do not age. They speak to a strange arithmetic. More is not always more. Two hands clutching after everything hold mostly smoke. One hand settled around something worthy can carry peace. This is not laziness dressed as wisdom. This is alignment dressed as clarity. It is the difference between a life that gathers depth and a life that stacks weight until the beams complain. The body knows the difference before the mind admits it. In the two-handful life, the breath sits high in the chest and the jaw tightens without permission. Sleep becomes negotiation instead of restoration. Joy is scheduled like a meeting and cancelled like a meeting. Laughter is present but thin, like sunlight through cold glass. In the one handful life, the breath drops lower and the shoulders ask less of the neck. Sleep returns with its old generosity. Joy comes unsummoned in ordinary rooms. Work regains the feeling of being joined to something that matters beyond applause. There is a fear that keeps the hands busy. It says that value is measured in how much you can hold and how much you can display. It says that setting something down is the first step toward being forgotten. It says that the person who loosens their grip will lose the race they did not choose to run. The fear is persuasive because it borrows the language of responsibility while it empties the heart of presence. It offers more and hides the cost. The cost is the erosion of wonder. The cost is the slow abandonment of the few things that would have been enough. Imagine two hands in a bright room. One reaches for every shining thing and comes away with fingers full of smoke that curls and vanishes. The other closes gently around a single brick with weight and edges and purpose. One hand lifts often and builds nothing. The other hand moves less and builds a wall that shelters a future conversation, a future rest, a future table. In this room, legacy is not the echo of many rooms visited. Legacy is the shelter you quietly raise where others can be fully themselves without performing. There are seasons when life is crowded and the crowding is honorable. New responsibilities arrive and stretch the frame. Someone you love needs more of you and the days feel narrow. The measure in such seasons is not how much you carry, but what you protect while you carry it. If the sacred few are kept near, the many can pass through without stealing the center. A simple meal, a steady word, a practice that keeps the soul lit like a lamp in a window. These are not grand gestures, and yet they outlast grand gestures because they are made of the same material as peace. The world will always clap for the second handful. It is visible, it is loud. It looks like victory in photographs. The first handful is quieter. It is the craft refined over years that no one applauds on ordinary Tuesdays. It is the face you offer your family when you step through the door and lay down the day. It is the way you treat the person who cannot repay you. It is the integrity that allows you to sleep without argument with yourself. These do not trend, these remain. When storms come, they are the weight in the bottom of the boat. There is a tenderness in learning the weight you can sustain without losing your song. Some discover that they were carrying ambitions that did not belong to them. Some discover that they had been living in rooms built from other people's expectation. Some discover that a dream they outgrew was still taking rent from their attention. The relief that follows is not the high of achievement. It is the quiet of freedom. The heart expands a little. The inner room feels aired out. The window opens and you notice a sound you had been missing for years. The sound of your own life at a survivable volume. Think again of the brick. It does not look impressive alone. It is heavy and ordinary and honest. In the hand, it says little. In the foundation, it says everything. One brick placed with intention becomes a line. A line becomes a wall. A wall becomes a home. A home becomes a place where courage returns, where children learn the shape of trust, where grief can sit and not feel alone, where joy has somewhere to ring without echoing into emptiness. This is legacy, not the shimmer of being known by everyone, the shelter of being truly known by the few who share your table. What will you lay down so something worthy can stand up? There is a week that feels like a soft lantern in the hand, not a program, not a performance, a gentle way of moving through days so the inner room can breathe. The body settles first, shoulders lower a little. The face loosens its effort, the heart listens, and the mind grows quiet enough to hear it. In that quiet, a handful of simple patterns return, old as wisdom and kind as a friend who knows your name. A day begins, and the gates are noticed, not with suspicion, with care. Ears, eyes, heart. What arrives at the threshold is greeted with a steady honesty. Some sounds carry peace and stay. Some images carry smoke and leave a taste that does not belong in a healthy house. The noticing itself changes the air. When the gate is seen, the city behind it remembers its value. This is not fear of the world. This is fidelity to the spring that feeds every word and every choice. The watchman does not shout. He simply stands. Another day leans into a calmer rhythm. Before the noise tries to hire your attention, a small orientation settles the direction of the hours. A clear line appears, thin and strong, pointing toward what truly matters. Then a single stretch of deep work holds the line and moves it forward without splintering it into fragments. Afterward, a brief stillness allows the work to land and become part of you, not just something you touched. It feels like healthy breathing for time itself. Inhale for clarity, exhale for integration. The nervous system, hungry for safety, finds it here in steadiness. There comes a conversation that carries weight without sharpness. A faithful voice offers a sentence you already half knew, and the body receives it like cool water even as the pride winces. The sting fades, the relief remains. There is no spectacle, only the return of alignment. You feel taller, not smaller. Your chest opens, not to defend, but to welcome a straighter way. This is how love speaks when it is loyal to the whole of a person. This is how correction becomes shelter. The stream of inputs begins to change. The pieces that feed envy grow quieter, and the room grows clearer. The heart remembers its true appetite and reaches for nourishment that does not leave it thirsty. Old words of wisdom enter like early light through a kitchen window, simple and warm, enough to see the table for what it is. Pages receive what the heart discovers, and the discoveries are unglamorous and priceless. Gratitude arrives in plain clothes. Desire softens its hurry and deepens its roots. Silence is no longer a threat. It becomes a home. Hands learn a gentler strength. The need to clutch at everything eases, and something with real weight rests in the palm. It feels like a single brick, ordinary and honest, ready to become part of a wall that shields what is precious. The other hand stops chasing smoke that vanishes even as it is gathered. This is not withdrawal from light. This is the recovery of substance. The calendar stops shouting. The day speaks in a human voice again. Across this week, the body keeps telling the truth. Breath moves lower. Sleep grows less argumentative. The jaw learns to unclench. The pulse does not jump at every noise. The brain stops spending attention on alarms that are not real fires. Circuits that once chased urgency begin to prefer coherence. The ancient picture of a guarded source becomes a neurological reality as stress chemistry recedes and steadier signals take the lead. What wisdom taught in the street, science nods to in the lab. Presence strengthens pathways that keep a soul whole. Ordinary moments start to carry a different light. A meal does not need a stage to feel holy. Work begins to sound like a vow kept rather than a crowd impressed. Money choices sit in the sunlight long enough to reveal whether they serve the larger story. Relationships feel less like negotiations and more like shared shelter. The city within and the city around you begin to agree with each other, not perfectly, but noticeably. The difference is quiet and unmistakable. By the time dusk returns, the images have woven themselves together. Gates that close softly without fear. A chariot with clear eyes and a steady hand. A mirror that reflects without flattering and without wounding. A spring sealed from dust so the water stays sweet. A single brick set in a foundation that will outlast moods. None of this is dramatic. All of this is durable. A week carried like this does not shout about change. It simply opens a path where change can walk with its own calm pace. Before daylight, the city holds its breath, and the walls glow faintly with the last of the night. A watchman stands where two roads meet, not heroic, simply awake. The kind of awake that comes from care rather than fear. He has learned the sounds of his city. He knows the creak of a cart with a loose wheel and the soft rhythm of a baker who rises before the birds. He knows the careless laugh of travelers returning late and the hush that comes when fog sits low on the stones. He also knows the sound that does not belong, the thin scrape of intent that looks for an open gate. His task is not dramatic. His task is to hear clearly so others can sleep deeply. In the quiet center, the spring waits, a circle of clear water covered through the dark hours to keep the night wind and its dust away. The spring is small to the eye and immense to the life of the town. Children drink from it after running the alleys. Old friends sit near it when they have said all that can be said and choose to rest together in silence. Merchants fill their jars and carry the water back to homes that would grow brittle without it. The spring asks for only a little honor and gives 1,000 small gifts in return. People live well when the watchman keeps the gate and the cover keeps the water clean. One morning, a traveler arrives with a clever smile and speaks to the watchman with easy charm. The road is long, the night was cold, the city looks kind. Why not leave the gate ajar so business prospers before dawn? The words are soft and the face is warm, yet something in the sound is thin. The watchman listens with his whole body. He has felt this tone before. It is the smoothness that hopes to pass while the lamps are low. He answers without a show. He does not scold. He does not grandstand. He simply rests his hand on the gate and lets the hinge remind him why it exists. Later in the square, Another voice approaches the spring. This one carries a mirror and a melody. The mirror flatters the face that looks into it, and the melody promises relief without effort. The cover on the water seems old-fashioned to this visitor. Why protect what is abundant? Why close what could be open? The voice says that the wind is clean and the city is friendly. The voice suggests that a little dust never hurt anyone. The spring listens the way water listens, by reflecting. The mirror loves its own image and misses what the water knows. Everything that enters becomes part of what everyone drinks. As the morning deepens, the streets fill and the two scenes quietly braid together. A gate kept with patience, a spring kept with care. A city that forgets these two will one day ask why the days have grown anxious and the mouths have grown dry. A city that honors them will one day look around and realize that peace has a texture, not loud, not proud, a softness that covers a hard wisdom. The watchman's gift is not that trouble never arrives. His gift is that trouble meets a boundary and is named before it can name the people. The spring's gift is not that thirst never returns. Its gift is that thirst is met by water that does not carry someone else's neglect. The parable lives because it is ordinary. The open gate looks like kindness, until a shadow learns the habit of coming and going without asking. The uncovered spring looks like freedom, until the water begins to taste like the road. The most dangerous losses rarely howl. They accustom, they normalize, they make the unusual feel usual, and the precious feel common. The watchman and the cover are not decorations. They are vows that protect life from the quiet fade that steals without breaking a window. Sometimes a child asks the watchman why he stands when the night seems safe. The man smiles, the tired smile of someone who has learned patience the long way. He tells a small story about seasons when the moon was bright and seasons when the fog hid the path, and how both required attention. He does not create fear in the child. He creates memory. He gives the young one a picture to carry into later years when the world will ask for the gate to be easy and the spring to be casual. The child may forget the words, but the image stays. A lantern tucked away for hours when wisdom needs a shape. The spring teaches in its own language. On days when the cover is lifted with care, the water greets the light with that quiet gleam that makes the face soften. On days when someone forgets and leaves the circle open through a storm, the taste changes and even a hurried mouth can tell. The city does not become wicked because the water is a little cloudy. It becomes weary. It becomes irritable. It becomes suspicious of small joys. The tone of conversations shifts by a hair. The patience of elders thins a little. No alarm sounds, and yet the fabric frays. By afternoon, the traveler has moved on, and the mirror has grown bored because the mirror requires worship, and the spring will not provide it. The watchman remains on the wall, and the cover returns to the water when the sun leans west. Nothing remarkable has happened in the eyes of the crowd. And yet something beautiful has happened. The ordinary was guarded. The source was honored. The city will sleep a little better for reasons very few will bother to name. Peace often arrives like that. It is the applause of a well-kept gate and a well-kept spring. Perhaps this is the quiet secret that the elders tried to hand down without sound. Strength is not only force. Strength is fidelity. Protection is not only a sword. Protection is a hinge that turns when it should and stops when it must. Holiness is not only a blaze. Holiness is clean water shared at a common well. If a person remembers these shapes, decisions simplify without becoming simplistic. The heart learns to weigh the offer that sparkles and the practice that sustains, and chooses the one that will still be good when the festival is over. Dusk returns and the first lamps are lit along the wall. The watchman watches the road as the sky turns the color of an old peach. The spring waits under its simple cover, quiet as breath. Somewhere, a home fills with laughter that is not thin, and a tired worker sets down the day without feeling robbed by it. No one thanks the gate, no one praises the lid, yet their quiet faithfulness carries the whole square like a hidden beam. This is elevation without spectacle. This is glory in plain clothes. This is how a city remembers who it is when the dark asks its questions and daybreak prepares its answers. Night loosens its hold, and the first light touches the highest stones. The city stirs, not with panic, but with the soft confidence of a place that remembers what keeps it steady. Somewhere, a gate sits on its hinge with an easy dignity. Somewhere, a spring waits under a simple cover that has learned the shape of the wind. A mirror stands unneeded because the face has chosen truth over polish. A chariot rests with clear eyes and an open view of the road. A single brick lies in the hand like an honest promise. All the images we have carried now feel less like stories and more like the furniture of a life that can hold real weight. The body knows when a night has changed something. Breath finds a slower pace without asking for permission. The shoulders carry the same name and the same roles, yet the old strain loosens its grip. What once chased attention from room to room stands outside and knocks without authority. The nervous system recognizes the rhythm of steadiness and begins to trust it again. This is not the thrill of a new vow. This is the relief of a true alignment. It does not need to be loud to be real. There is a kind of reverence that grows in ordinary rooms when the inner world is tended. Dishes are washed with the ease of a person who no longer bargains with every minute. Work sounds like a covenant rather than a contest. Money becomes a servant rather than a verdict. Laughter gains depth because it no longer hides a tremor. Grief is allowed a chair because it no longer threatens to flood the house. Hope returns with its original tone, not as a performance, but as the quiet courage that has walked with humanity since the first early mornings. Wisdom rarely arrives with fireworks. It walks a slow circle around your decisions and blesses the ones that agree with peace. It asks nothing for itself. It is generous and stubborn, and it keeps showing up. It was there when the watchman chose attention over ease. It was there when the spring was covered against the night winds. It was there when the hand let go of smoke and held something that could become a wall. It was there when flattery was recognized as a sedative and truth was welcomed as medicine. It will be there in the next small choice and the next and the next. If a tender fear lingers at the edges, it does not come to shame. It comes to clarify. It reminds the heart that drift is not neutral and that comfort without conscience is a quiet thief. It points gently toward the places where love wants to build and where courage wants to speak. It keeps the eyes open without making them hard. It keeps the hands open without making them empty. It keeps the soul awake without making it frantic. This fear is the beginning of wisdom because it honors what is worth protecting. What has been spoken here is older than the noise and kinder than the pressure. It will wait for you in the mornings when the house is still. It will meet you in the middle of loud places as a sudden clarity that feels like a friend. It will stand by your side when your name is praised and when your name is quiet, unchanged and unsurprised. It will not force. It will invite. It will not humiliate. It will heal. It will keep you in the street where the voice of understanding has always called to anyone willing to listen. The city inside and the city around you are not two separate countries. They share water. They share gates. They share weather. When the inner watchman is honored, the outer world receives a different kind of presence. When the inner spring is kept, the words that flow carry less grit and more kindness. When the inner mirror tells the truth, the choices grow simpler in a way that does not make you small. When the inner hand rests on one thing of substance, the outer life stops scattering its strength and begins to gather a home. The light grows, the road appears, the voices that matter are easier to hear. The noise has not vanished, yet it no longer decides. There is space to build with that one steady brick. There is room for gratitude that does not need a stage. There is a path that does not announce itself, but reveals itself to the feet that move with integrity. This is not a sudden rescue. This is a patient rescue. This is a life remembering itself. What will be true of you 90 days from now because you acted today?